This is Ag Matters PM from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, brought to you by the Iowa Soybean Association, your source for the latest Iowa ag news headlines right here in the heart of the heartland. With reports from our award-winning team of Dustin Hoffman, Riley Smith, Mark Magnuson, and Andy Peterson. Now, from the IARN studios in Des Moines, here's Riley.
Good day and welcome into Ag Matters PM on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. I'm Riley Smith. Today is Friday, March 7th of 2025. Very glad to be back in the studio after some traveling difficulties, but we made it back all in one piece. So glad to see you for today's show. In today's episode, we'll have a check at the closing markets, as always, this time with Curt Kimmel of agmarket.net. But for the news segment, I talked with Dan Halstrom. He's the president and CEO of the U.S. Meat Export Federation. Had a great opportunity to visit with him as they are based in Denver. We talked on Tuesday about the tariff situation. Of course, this was before it was announced that there would be delays to the tariff situation as far as USMCA products go. So obviously a lot of that weighs into that discussion, but it's still relevant for what will happen once that delay is over once again. We are here at Commodity Classic in Denver, Colorado, talking with Dan Halstrom. He's the president and CEO of the U.S. Meat Export Federation. Of course, now those tariffs that were previously delayed, now in effect. We're seeing retaliatory moves already. What's the current situation as we're standing here for those tariffs?
Yeah, currently what we're looking at is Canada and China have announced their retaliatory schedules. Mexico has not. President Sheinbaum had out on several news wires this morning that they were going to wait until Sunday to announce whatever their retaliatory schedule might be. Personally, I think that's some positive news because that tells me that they're trying to work something out between now and Sunday. I know they've been in big talks all of last week as well, with a large percentage of the Sheinbaum cabinet being in Washington, D.C. So we'll see where that leads us. But at a very high level, just to give you a little feel for the beef and pork industries, we totaled our global export sales last year were about $19.1 billion US globally. And of that, Canada, Mexico, and China for beef and pork made up about $8.4 billion, so a little over 40%. So obviously this is very concerning if you just look at the economics of what we're dealing with in terms of potential impact.
And we know that not only are they great importers of typical cuts of meat that we'd be exporting, specialty cuts as well, very big, particularly in Mexico. There's been a lot of market diversification down there. If we look at these tariff situations, say Mexico starts with those retaliatory measures, what are we maybe guessing would be the impact on the work that's been done already for that diversification?
Well, I think one thing you have to remember, and you know, our hope is that whatever does happen will be short term, because the goal is obviously to get back to where it's a fluid market, right? So I think the first thing to remember is that demand overall for beef and pork last year was probably as good as I've ever seen it. So we have a very solid base of demand. Demand from our quality, our nutrition, our safety, and the taste experience. We're unique, especially on U.S. beef. We're unique vis-a-vis some of our major global competitors. So with that being said, what could the potential impact be? I don't think anyone knows for sure. But one thing to keep in mind is these export markets are vital because not only do they take a lot of cuts that we don't use here, like variety meats. Pork and beef variety meats, one of the number one destination for pork is China. Number two is Mexico. And on the beef side, it's the other way around. So, you know, two of your key markets for variety meats are impacted by this. So it doesn't mean that trade will stop, but it will impact the revenue side eventually because it'll flow through.
Right, and in that short term of just kind of figuring things out with that situation, for producers, what do they need to be thinking about when it comes to watching the news and maybe looking at the bigger picture like you mentioned?
Yeah, well, I think that, I think you need to keep everything in context, and we use the term keep your powder dry, because you just, this is probably just the start of volatility, right? And I look back at the Trump administration number one, where there was some volatility then as well. And what ended up happening is in the end, especially in 2020, we saw a lot of trade deals, bilateral trade deals that worked to the benefit of agriculture, especially the beef and pork industries. You had China phase one. So we went from a little over $200 million in sales of U.S. beef to China to $2 billion in 2 years. Japan phase one agreement, ag agreement, also was key. We had a very high duty vis-a-vis our competition, and we brought us into par. And then the last one being the USMCA. The NAFTA 1.0, the revised version, happened in the Trump administration. So I got to think there's what's going on with Mexico probably has something to do maybe with speeding up that process. There was going to be a review of USMCA anyway in 2026, so it sounds like they might try to move that sooner. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. So we'll have to kind of play it by ear. But I say that my advice is that demand is very strong. So don't lose confidence in that regard. And I think we'll weather the storm here. It might take a little bit of time, but eventually I think we'll get through it.
And of course, there's been plenty of expanded access in other markets as well. There's been a lot of work to promote, especially I know just overseas, to get new access that we might have not had before.
Exactly. And we're seeing market development in some key regions outside of some of these major markets we always talk about. Central America, markets like Guatemala, Nicaragua. You know, we never used to talk a lot about them, and now they're one of the mainstay regions. Colombia is another one. And you go into Southeast Asia, we've seen dramatic growth in places like the Philippines and Malaysia on the pork side. So yeah, you're exactly right. One of our keys is to diversify, our destination markets, and the beef and pork industries have done that the last 4 or 5 years.
All right, Dan, lots of great information today. For anyone who would like to stay up to date on the latest from the U.S. Meat Export Federation, how can they do that?
Yep, well, you can check out our website, www.usmef.org, or give us a call. We're based in Denver here. We're easy to find. And like I said, don't get too fired up about things. There's probably there's going to be some bumps in the road. But in the end, we have the supply of high-quality product, and the world's demanding it.
That again was U.S. Meat Export Federation President and CEO Dan Halstrom. Thanks as always to Meristem and the Iowa Corn Growers Association for supporting our coverage of Commodity Classic this year. We'll take a look at the closing markets next, but first here's a word from our sponsor, the Iowa Soybean Association and the Soy Checkoff. This is Ag Matters PM.
Iowa Soybean Association is driven to deliver for Iowa's 40,000 soybean farmers. We're proud to provide objective agronomic research, a helping hand with soil and water stewardship, and timely industry news powered by the Soybean Checkoff. Learn more at iasoybeans.com.
It's time now for the Ag Matters PM Closing Market Summary, your source for market analysis and settlement prices from the day's trade in Chicago, courtesy of the folks at agmarket.net.
Welcome back to Ag Matters PM on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. Talking now with Curt Kimmel of agmarket.net for our closing market summary. First off, Curt, what do we see going on in the grain markets today?
Well, we're actually able to close a little higher, corn up 2 to 5. On the weekly chart, we regained the early weeks lost and came back to close just about unchanged. Soybeans in mix today. On the weekly chart, we got close back to unchanged. In the wheat, same situation. It was 1 to 2 lower today, but it kind of tried to work its way out of the hole here. We kind of regained some of that big down here earlier in the week, so hopefully we've got a little low in here to start next week. A lot more tariff talk, on, off. And I guess on social media, the new administration was talking a little tougher on stance on Russia, so this thing's going to change from hour to hour, day to day. So volatility is definitely on the rise.
And of course, as those headlines come out, we just saw that delay to tariffs based on like USMCA products. As those headlines come out, it's just going to be another thing to react to for each of those headlines, right?
Exactly. It's going to vary. This thing's moving more than a weather forecast during the drought, I tell you. It's got everybody off center. But two, probably a new little twist is tougher stance on Russia, that Black Sea region and so forth. So we'll see if that gives us some export business here as we move down the road. But we're looking forward to the monthly supply demand report here next week. And the analysts are actually humming in for about unchanged numbers. And I'm surprised. I thought the South America production numbers would be adjusted a little bit more, but they're kind of holding pat there. That South American water forecast is favorable, and harvest is moving quite briskly here. We're above average pace on Brazilian bean harvest, and that second corn crop going in, it's going in above the average pace too. So outside the Trump news, we'll kind of watch those two factors next week.
And then looking at the livestock side of things, how did cattle and hogs trade today?
Well, on the Trump side there, we got to remember that we ship a lot of pork to Mexico there. So it's going to be important as we come into April that we kind of cool these things down a little bit. Fat cattle back in bottle rocket mode here. They finished anywhere from 240 to 380 higher. They had a massive reversal to the upside in the weekly chart, up over $7. Hogs 50 cents to $1.30 higher. They saw about a $3-4 reversal up. So technically it looked pretty good. But the key in here is cookout feature, and this weather is going to give us a chance to fire up the grill again.
All right, Curt, lots of great information today. For anyone who would like to get in touch with agmarket.net for more marketing information, how can they do that?
You nailed it, agmarket.net. Click on Intel. That's where the group puts together their marketing and trading ideas.
All right, Curt, thanks again for the analysis as always, and we look forward to talking again soon.
Very good. Have a good weekend.
That again was Curt Kimmel of agmarket.net. We'll take a look at how the numbers close through the market window at iowaagnet.com.
May corn up 5 1/4 at 469 1/4. May soybeans down 2 1/4 at 10.25 even. May soybean meal down 50 cents at 304.40. Soybean oil up 25 cents at 43.42. Chicago wheat down 2 3/4 at 551 1/4. Kansas City hard red wheat down 1 even at 564 3/4. Minneapolis spring wheat down 2 even at 592 even. May oats down 5 3/4 at 371 1/2. On the Merc, April live cattle up $4 even at 227 cents. March feeder cattle up $2.95 at 276.97. April lean hogs up 70 cents at 87.35. Pork cutout went unchanged at 96.80. And March Class 3 milk up 9 cents at 18.38.
And that's been a check of the markets here on Ag Matters PM. That also brings us to the end of today's show. You can find all of our content on our website at iowaagnet.com. Also follow us on social media at Facebook, X, LinkedIn, and TikTok. Find our video content as well as previous episodes of AM PM on our YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell to see when those videos go live. Don't forget as well our free morning, midday, and closing market podcasts, as well as the Iowa Ag Matters podcast and Pods of Potential. Find those on your favorite podcasting service at Apple, Amazon, Spotify, or Podbean, or, as I said earlier, at iowaagnet.com under the podcast tab. From the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network studios in Des Moines, I'm Riley Smith. On behalf of Mark Magnuson, Andy Peterson, and Dustin Huffman, we thank you for watching. This has been Ag Matters PM.